Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dixon, and today we've got Steven Puri on the podcast. He is the founder and CEO of the Sukha Company. They are a kind of productivity app that helps you prioritize your to-do list and making sure you're doing the most important things in the time of the day where you can be most productive and get into a flow state. This is a very fascinating episode. We walk through his career being an executive in the film and movie industry. We talk about some of the interesting kind of movies that he's done some special effects on. He's also been the founder of 3 startups. 1 was successful, 2 failed. We talk about the successes and the failures and how he used the lessons from those failures to build the Sukha Company. So super interesting episode. So let's get Steven on the pod. Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon. All right, Steven, thank you for being a guest on the podcast. Nice to see you.
Hello there.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. I guess let's give the audience a little bit of an overview of who you are, where you are, and what you're up to right now.
Okay, here's the reason to listen. And if this is not interesting, tune out now. I'm one of the few people you'll meet who has been a senior executive at a couple motion picture studios and has also raised $21 million of venture.
Got it. Okay.
Run 3 tech companies, 1 exit, 2 failures. As they say, you learn more from the failures. Yeah. So a lot of what I do now is share what I've learned being able to go between those 2 worlds and see what are the things from film and television that apply in tech, especially as it relates to productivity, building companies, having the focus to really succeed.
Well, let's start with the film studio. I'm very curious about that. So what was it like? Were you living in LA? Like maybe give me the glitz and glam and maybe any 1 or 2 actresses that you ran into that would be super awesome to talk about for a second.
Okay. So fun little lead up into this. Both parents, mommy and daddy, were both IBM engineers. Okay. And that's an important part of the story because when I was little, Mom, who was a software engineer on the System 360, taught me to code. And, like your mom is a great ice skater, you learned ice skate when you're little, right?
Right.
So went to USC in Los Angeles. I grew up back east, but went to USC. And USC is a very strong cinema TV school. So a lot of my buddies in the dorm were aspiring Lucases and Spielbergs. And, you go out Tuesday night to the movies and, talk for hours about, what was cool about the movie. And I happened to be in LA when film went digital. And it's just lucky for me because I could speak engineer and now I could speak director. And that was a very small set of people that could go between a creative type, what do you think this should be? And talk to an engineering language where they go, oh yeah, okay, I get what we need to do. So my career took off. I produced digital visual effects for a number of movies, about 14. And among them, produced the digital effects for Independence Day. We won the Academy Award for the visual effects on ID4. That, of course, helps your career tremendously when you have an Academy Award. We're on that kind of team. And with the director-producer of Independence Day, with whom I got along really well, we set up a company, the 3 of us, to do digital visual effects. Grew that to about 82 people. And that was my first exit. Because that company, we got acquired by Das Werk, this big German conglomerate. And in my mid to late 20s, we cashed out and I took 2 years off and just traveled the world. Awesome. So how I got to the studio was that gave me the taste from being like a little code monkey when I was little to the world of film. And it was cool because I worked on True Lies and Braveheart and a bunch of movies, right? And a lot of good directors. I decided I wanted to actually make movies, like make films, not be the guy helping to make someone else's film. Dug in on that. Ended up, as you know, as an executive vice president for Kurtzman Orsi at DreamWorks, vice president at Fox. Well, at Fox, I was running like the Die Hard franchise, the Wolverine franchise, stuff like that. Fun names to drop. Yes, had meetings with Bruce. This is pre-aphasia. This is back when he was going through his divorce. And it's funny because Bruce, in real life, kind of plays the character Bruce Willis. Like, you hang out with your friends, you're like, oh yeah, Justin's fun. But it's almost like with Bruce, he's playing a character as he's with you that he knows is a character. And it's kind of a funny experience being in that kind of sort of room, especially with the first dollar gross, like $20 million a movie guy. Hugh Jackman, when I got the job at Fox, one of the nicest guys you'll meet in Hollywood.
Oh,
like
really?
he called me from his cell phone here I got the job. And he was on set in Detroit on Sean Levy's movie. And he called me himself, not through an assistant, assistants patching. He just got my number, called me. It was like, hey, Steve, we haven't met, blah, blah, blah. I look forward to doing the Wolverine sequel with you. I'm on set right now. When I get back to LA, we should hang out and talk about it. 3-minute call, but you know what?
Yeah.
Just like told me a lot about what it'd be like to work with him. It's fun stuff like that. And then I reached a point at Fox where I was like, the movies I'm making, they're not going to change the world in any meaningful way. I'm not going to tell my children, be excited, daddy's going to work on Die Hard 9 now to pay for your college. So I decided to get back to the one thing I knew, which was not film, which was engineering. Got in, did a couple little startups, raised about $3 million for 2 startups. Both of them never got to a Series A. It was humbling for me. It hurt. I felt embarrassed. Then a lot of the lessons that I saw in building those companies and how my teams worked, I thought about how to make them super productive, make them healthier in their productivity. I built that tool that I would have given to myself in building them. And that's kind of my path. There are probably just a couple of things I left out in there. There's, a couple drinking binges, some trips to Mexico. Nothing that extraordinary.
That's for the other podcast that I have. We talk about
right. Later tonight.
That's right. Yeah.
Late night with Justin.
So I could definitely drive down the kind of tell me more about film and studio and all the cool people you've met. But I'm curious a little bit about the failures, right? So obviously you had very early success with the digital effects company that you started, had the opportunity to travel around the world, and then you started these 2 other companies that ultimately did not, make it. I guess before we talk
about call them fail. By the way, I'm totally comfortable with failure. What I pitched my investors and myself was not the outcome. And in my mind, it's a failure. And it's not bad to say failure. It's just, we didn't get there. So you can call it failure.
I guess as you look back, and I'm sure you've done this a lot, what are some of the key things that you wish you saw earlier on before it failed that, if somebody's listening to this and they have a startup and we're recording this early June 2025, it's still not a great capital raising environment for startups. Equity is still holding on to deals. Venture capital aren't selling or buying. Like there's just a lot of uncertainty in the world around startups and funding. Exactly. What are you like looking back at those 2 companies? I guess first of all, what were they? Like, what was the purpose and product or solution? Quickly, and then what would you wish you have seen and been like, oh, maybe I would have pivoted and this would have worked to actually make it successful.
Yeah. Okay. There are 2 lessons. Let me start with those because I think those are probably most germane to the people listening. Like, what can I get out of this? Right. Yeah. So there are 2 lessons, and I'll tell you, my process was pretty simple with both of them because when I exited in my 20s, I thought it was easy, as one does in their 20s. They think I'm smart, I'm invincible, like this is all easy, right? So coming back 10 years later and doing those 2 companies and leaving a pretty prestigious job at Fox where everyone was watching, like, oh, Puri's leaving film to go do this tech thing, Yeah. Man, that hurt. So the process I had was this, is when I reached the moment of, okay, you know what, I need to speak to our key partners, our, my investors and say, I think we've left it all in the field. Like for whatever reasons it may be, macroeconomic conditions, decisions I've made, decisions I didn't make, whatever it is, I need to have that hard conversation and apologize. Just go, hey man, we tried as hard as we could. We didn't get there. I'm really sorry. And both times what I did was there's a chair that I have that has it's by the window. And I sat there and with a legal pad and a pencil, not like dictating into my phone or tap my lap. I wanted to write this out in my hand. I wrote, what did I learn? Oh, it's fresh. While the wounds are still bleeding, like, where does it hurt? Not like a year later when you're like, I don't know. It could have been. No, right now, capture where the blood is, right? And I'll tell you, there are 2 things that top of that list. Number 1, both times was listen, which I think is now drummed so deeply into my head. Because I needed to hear. I needed to tell myself that. And it was listen really deeply. The way I listened in film with writers to understand how do you develop a story, right? How do you understand what the character is really about, what they're saying, what they're not saying? I needed to apply that more with users, that it's really hard to get out of users what they like, what they don't like, because so often when they know you work on the product, they want to be nice. And they don't tell you the thing like, well, a lot of cars have 4 wheels, They're like, no, your car's really cute, and you just need to get to that point where you listen deeply, go, well, what's the thing that's missing? Well, there's usually a right rear wheel on these when I drive them,
Yeah.
So that is the number one thing I'm going to say. Both times it was just, I got to listen at a higher resolution, listen more deeply, ask more questions, and then shut up and listen. Let people talk and tell you what they think. So that was really important. Another one, and this is true of the first company, was don't let the investment put a smoke screen over your unit economics. There are so many companies that famously raise just going, oh my God, we're going to give taxi rides to everybody in the world for 4,000 miles for $1, right? We're going to get them all hooked on Uber and Lyft, and we're going to get them hooked on whatever product, right? DoorDash. So they're just like, we raised $70 billion of venture so we can subsidize all this, and the unit economics suck, right? God bless it, they got away with that. You can't do that when you're saying, oh, I'm going to raise 3 million,
Right.
And I was definitely guilty of not focusing enough on the unit economics with that because I was not raising $70 billion,
I guess on the question or listen more, I guess, did you assume you knew what the customers wanted and you were building kind of the assumption and you wish kind of looking back, it was like, let me build an MVP and then get real feedback on what's good, what's bad.
Yes.
Because I'm okay if somebody calls my baby ugly because I'm going to pivot and use that data.
I use that metaphor very frequently. That is a fantastic metaphor. And it is what you said. It is balancing. I have strong product instincts. I think there's some sort of tomato-based tangy sauce that would taste good on a burger. With, let's go make 100 burgers, try different sauces, and have people tell us which of these sauces taste like ketchup.
Got it.
It is that balance there. So it's knowing how not to get derailed, not having this hypothesis that there is a tomato-based sauce and have someone talk you into mayonnaise,
Yep.
Oh, the users want a white sauce. So it's
interesting. And then I guess on the unit economics piece, so if you are in this pre-seed or seed round that you're raising and you're raising enough money to kind of give you the 12-month runway or whatever it is,
sure.
How do you look at because a lot of times you're still going to need to raise money, especially if you're building something tech or especially hardware related. How do you kind of present or keep the unit economics top of mind, knowing that there's another round that you're going to need to raise because you're getting yourself from point A to point B, and that point B is maybe that minimal viable product, but to get to scale, you're going to need another kind of treasure of cash. So how do you kind of keep the unit economics in mind as you go up the growth scale?
Yes, and let me preface my answer with my hat is off to those founders who are just so confident they're going to just through charm and force of will keep raising at bigger valuations more money, right? They're like, spend it all, go buy growth, dump this money into meta ads or whatever is the growth channel du jour.
Yep.
Because with those numbers, I'll go out in 6 weeks, go get injuries in the lead round, everyone else will pile in and it's done, right? So the people who do that, absolutely fantastic. I'm not that guy, right? So my advice, you should put through the filter of what I've learned, the way I work. If they're not paying, you're not making them happy. And I do not believe in taking someone's advice, a user's advice I'm talking about here, if ultimately they wouldn't pay for this product. And the moment that they do, pull out their credit card, put it in Stripe and go, yeah, that's worth $5 a month, $10 a month, $50 a month. That's when I start listening. That's a real customer for this product. And a lot of friends were working on early Instagram. We're at Facebook before it's called Meta. We're at Twitter before it's called X. And there's definitely this sense of like, no, man, it's a user grab. Don't worry. First thing you're going to optimize is user growth. Then it's going to be revenue growth. Then it's going to be profitability, right? So on that first wave, don't worry about profitability. Don't worry about money at all. It's just grow, more money, more investment, right? So that's really the razor for me is like all the happy talk in the world doesn't matter until someone goes, yeah, dude, this is good enough. I'd put down my credit card. Right. And then you listen. You go, how can I make it more beautiful?
Right. How can I get more money out of you if I make the feature ads that you're talking about, et cetera, et cetera? Okay.
Just saying.
And so what are you up to right now? So obviously we didn't even get to your current venture that you're working on. So maybe share a little bit more about that. And I'm assuming, and we can unpack this a little bit here in a second, that you've taken some of these lessons that you've learned, at least the two that you mentioned, to put into your current venture that
totally
hopefully will be successful, that more successful than the other two.
Let's hope, right? So I'll tell you what I'm doing, what I'm focused on right now is how do you have the greatest amount of productivity in a healthy way, either for yourself or for your team. So for ICs or for leaders, right? And I'll tell you some of the things that I noticed in doing those two small startups were like, man, there's some stuff in film that totally applies to this. Because here's the thing, for many of us, many verticals, Zoom became a verb like 4 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Suddenly, oh my God, we could work from your house, and maybe I don't know. Is it work? Not work? You know, film has done it for 100 years. It has been called remote work or hybrid work. It's called like pre-production, post-production, like the writing stage, right? Writers write remote in coffee shops at each other's writing partners' houses and stuff like that, right? Then you get into pre-production. Someone opens a small production office. 2 days a week, you're in there doing rewrites to try and hook Brad Pitt to star in the movie or meet at the costume designer, right? The rest of the time, you're hybrid. So I was looking at that because it's an established process for a century of like, hey man, here's how you lead through each stage of a film. And here's how you contribute if you're the writer or the designer, whatever it is, right? So what I did was I took that, coupled that with a lot of what the smart people have written. By that, I mean like Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow and flow states, James Clear, Cal Newport's deep work, like smart people have thought about this. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. All we wanted to do was say, how can we distill that down to a really simple user interface that makes you feel inspired? There are a lot of apps out there that time you. Oh, I need a Pomodoro timer. God bless, go find one. A lot of apps that's like, play beautiful music. And Dell's really good. Brain FM's really good. Like, they're great options. But how do we create an experience where you go, oh my God, it's like noon and I've done the thing that moves my company forward. It's not lunch yet. Or I've moved myself and my blog or my YouTube channel or whatever that thing forward. How do we give you that feeling? You're like, what just happened? And a lot of that comes from flow states. So that's what I do now. Yep. Is I create that and help people get there.
And so you're
called Sukha. It's a crazy name.
And so maybe explain the application. So if I'm a user of this product, this platform, how is it helping me get into a flow state? Because I've listened to Cal Newport's book on deep work. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
I've actually met him. And I think as we have our phones that are probably within arm's reach of us, I know mine's literally right here, it's harder and harder to get into deep work because we're constantly being pinged or buzzed and alerts and notifications and all that, as opposed to what Cal Newport says, it's just turn all that stuff off, go sit in a cabin in the woods for 3 months and just do work, right? Not all of us have that ability to do that. And so how does your platform solution help the everyday digitally focused person get into a flow state in a much more regular fashion and kind of so they can be more present throughout the rest of their day, right? Because that's the other piece is you're constantly being pinged and you're not actually being present.
Yes, I love that you casually use the term flow state. Do you think your whole audience knows flow state, or should we unpack that for a second?
I'll let you unpack it because maybe not everybody is familiar.
Okay, so flow state, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, this Hungarian psychologist, he coined this term because he said, I've studied all these high performers. They get in this concentrated state where they do great things. There's so much commonality in how they get into that state and what they do in it. So he studied them, and you may know it under another name. He called it flow because he said at a certain point, it's almost like these people get on a river and the river is carrying them forward in addition to their own effort, right? I think Michael Jordan called it in the zone, where he's that great quote about it's me and the ball. Also, I always screw up his quote, but he was like, I stayed up all night. I forgot to eat. I don't think I drank any water. And by the way, I painted Guernica. What do you think? You like it? Right. And that sense of losing all track of time, being so deeply immersed and doing amazing work, that is a flow state. That is ultimately where we want to get you. Now, I'm going to tell you, much like a character in a movie that has pain, I design backwards from my pain. And I'm going to tell you, there are two specific things that are painful to me, character flaws that I need to overcome. One presented in the morning. One was what I call the cold start problem, which was, oh, tomorrow at 9, Justin, I'm going to get Joe and I need to do this, need to do that, right? And yet I would find myself at 9:15, 9:30, maybe returning emails or, checking my Twitter for news or something, I looked at it deeply. I was like, that is just straight up procrastination. I don't actually need to be doing those things. And when you peel back that onion of like, well, why are you procrastinating? I learned it was one of two kinds of overwhelm. I was either overwhelmed looking at my task list and saying, there's 17 things on it. I'm never going to get this all done. I'm paralyzed just by the number of things that are staring me in the face, right? So I wouldn't get started. Or there's something on there that was so big that was like, I'm not going to write my book this morning. I'm not going to redesign the whole UI this morning. You know what I mean? So what we did, to answer your question, is for that, when you go to our website, Sukha, you can sign up. It's 7 days free, no credit card, no bullshit, right? Hit play. When you're ready to get going, hit play. There's a smart assistant who will help you choose of those 17 things, which 3 are the priority you need to see. And then while you work, hides the other 14. So you can just see the 3. And suddenly it's very accomplishable. When we made this change, I can tell you now, our members have completed over 500,000 tasks in the system. They're 77% more probable to finish 3 when they can only see 3 than when they could see their whole list. They more probably would finish 2. Same tasks, same time, right? That is something we do. And the smart assistant will also help you. If it's like, Justin, hey, man, you have write your book on here as a task. What if we turn that into outline chapter 3, which feels more like a 30-minute task than write your book? And you're like, okay, cool. And you get going. And there's beautiful flow music and Pomodoro timers and all the table stake stuff. But the magic is when you fall into a flow state and you look up after 2 hours, you're like, damn, I'm like half done for the day. That's a great feeling.
Very interesting. And so I've definitely fallen into that analysis paralysis kind of mindset where you've got 30 things to do, and so you don't do anything. But I've also fallen into the problem where I've got one thing to do and I still don't do anything, right? And so or if I've got the 30 thing list, I do the easy things because the hard things are hard, right? And so does your assistant help you to kind of prioritize the list so that you're not just saying, oh, I need to send an email to this person. So you send that email and you check the box, like, yes, I did something good, versus, oh, I need to follow up with this client because they owe me $50,000. And that is way more valuable than that email that you sent that has nothing to do with business, right?
Very true.
Yeah. So how does that work?
Let me tell you, there are 2 schools of thought on this. And I originally was in one and I migrated to the other. So there is the commonly known as eat the frog from that Mark Twain expression, right? Which is the biggest, hairiest thing. Do it first. The momentum for doing that big, awful thing you hate first just makes the rest of the day easier, right? A lot of people swear by that. I used to. I experimented though, and I found this. And this is going to run a little counter to some of the productivity knowledge, but I believe very much find your path, find what works for you, And I found that actually starting with 1 or 2 things that I could knock out gave me a feeling of momentum that carried me further through the day. I know it sounds crazy, but if it's like, oh, you know what? I just need to update the copy in that email campaign or do that. It takes me 15 minutes for each. But seeing those little like wins gets me to that third thing, which is sometimes the big hairy one where you're like, oh, I've been dreading it. And now I'm like, oh, I'm on a roll.
Yeah.
I actually work that way. So your assistant starts to learn you.
Okay.
And starts to recommend stuff, including stuff like, hey, Justin, in the mornings, you're way more productive when you listen to this playlist. Do you want me to put that on for you?
That was going to be my next thing. I'm much more alert, productive, so in the mornings than I am in the afternoons. Some people are the opposite, right? Some people are night owls. And
chronotype.
So my normal kind of flow in the morning is I need to get the high brain strategic thinking. I need to just shut the world out and plug into something hard in the morning, because in the afternoon, my brain is cooked. And so that's when I do some of my, low brain wave kind of activities. And so I'm curious if your app kind of adjusts and learns based on, my productivity kind of calculator would be like, let's do stuff that's hard in the morning. Let's do some easy stuff in the afternoon. And somebody might be completely different.
Starting to see the patterns of what kind of things you do when, like if you're coding, it's like, hey man, you're better at debugging stuff in the morning, or you're better writing new features in the morning, that sort of thing. I'll tell you, there's a screenwriter This is the first time I really became attuned to chronotype. On Bass, he has written movies, Best Friends, a whole bunch of stuff. Julia Roberts has been in his movies, Redford, like the whole thing, right? He famously does not talk to his family in the morning. And he's an attorney who turned screenwriter. And he had this moment with his family where he said, I can't do the, hey, who wants cereal? Who wants pancakes? Did you do your homework? He's like, I'm going to get up. I'm not going to talk to anyone until probably 9. So he had like a good 4 hours work. Because he said, I realize I can't write dialogue if I've spoken to you or I've heard you talk to me. So his family was like, totally cool. You're bringing home 1.2 million screenplay. We will talk to you at 9, Dad, right?
Yeah.
But that's how you write. That's how he wrote the dialogue that gets those stars to go, this role. Over the 60 roles with an offer stapled to the front, these are the words I want to say. And that sensitivity to chronotype, where he's just like, I realize I have to do it this way. That made me go, oh, once you start becoming sensitive to it yourself, you're like, what you said, in the afternoons, I can't do this kind of work. In the mornings, I can. I'm very similar to what you said, actually.
It's interesting. I had a boss early in my career that was the exact opposite. It was a sales leader, and he would always talk to his wife on the way to work, even though he just left, because he needed to get the practice of talking to then go into the office and lead the team and then jump on sales calls.
That's awesome. So he knows that.
Yeah. So every morning he would always come in talking to his wife, and they had the very similar conversation every day, but it was just his
warm-up
program and model of like, okay, let me just talk to her and then I'm ready to talk the rest of the day. Kind of thing.
I love that.
What have you, I guess, so going back to some of the things that you kind of said lessons around, like what have you a thought going into this new project, this new company that you had to listen to your users and then had to pivot because maybe they called your baby ugly, or at least a feature of it ugly? But were there any things that you had to listen and learn from in this new venture?
The answer, of course, is there's been a lot of it. And I think there's sort of 3 outcomes of those conversations. There's I explain why we're doing what we're doing for like an early version of a new feature. Hey, Justin, I know it's not polished yet, but it's going to be this and this is why. And sometimes they go, oh, I get it now. Da, da, da. And then when it's polished, it goes right. Or you explain it and they're like, no, I will never use that. Like it fundamentally breaks the mental model I have for this. Okay, super cool. And then there's let's see, we'll see how that goes. So I've gotten better now at explaining things that are in some sort of nascent state. I'll give you an example. We talked about the rule of 3, right? I'm going to show you 3 things. I'm not going to know analysis paralysis, as you said. Yeah. At first, that was super frustrating. There were some people who were like, I need to be able to, have multiple tasks in a session. This breaks the thing for me. The villagers with the pitchforks and the torches were at my door.
Yeah,
right?
I can multitask. Trust me, I can multitask.
Right, exactly. And here's the funny thing. As much as they were asking for, like, to use that early metaphor we use about burgers, they were like, no, it cannot be red. It has to be white. When we talked about this, I said, you know what? I am medically diagnosed with ADHD, which makes me a kind of interesting person to develop a productivity app because I'm an extreme case of really hard to concentrate, right? Let me tell you why it works scientifically. Got them about halfway there and it was still okay, I understand now it works for some people. I hear you. But I'm not buying into it. I don't want it that way. Yeah. And then listening to them, where it's like, well, why exactly does that not work? It was like, well, I don't want to have to input a new task during my session. Simplest solution ever. People are super happy. It was, okay, those other 14 tasks, what if I give you a little switch in settings? You can turn it on. If you like this, you can turn it on. And what we'll do is when you finish one of those 3 tasks, it'll just pull the top task from those 14. So it'll just flow through. Simple solution, not what they asked for, but it was a solution to the thing that they were complaining about. So there's been a lot of those moments. I can't say I've all solved them as gracefully. Try to, and when we screw up, we're very honest. We're like, hey guys, we launched this feature. You hate it. Sorry. We'll try again.
Right. So where are you now in the company? Like how big is it? And I guess how long has it been up and running so far?
So it's been called Sukha for 2 years, which I happen to know because we named it on my honeymoon, which is kind of funny. It's actually a listening to users story, which is we had an early version of this. I bought a code base of like a timer app. the to-do list time wrap, right? And I was like, I think we can turn this into what we want. And we needed a new name. And I had every bad name. Justin, I had, one of those like sheets where you write out all your brainstorms. Yep. I had every bad focus flow state distraction timer app 14, all of them on a sheet of paper. I hated them all. I hated myself for writing them all that, right? So Laura and I got married. We met in yoga. We have a daily yoga practice. We went to Bali for our honeymoon.
Nice.
I'm very grateful that's where our life is. We can go to Bali for our honeymoon. So we going there and I said, you know what? These next 2 weeks, one of the rare times no one's going to ask me to approve a purchase order for a stapler. No one's going to ask me to change the AWS settings. You know what I mean? Maybe this is where my unconscious mind will bubble up that great, like, oh, it's Amazon. It's not about books. It's Amazon. It's Nike. Right. Is it about shoes? I don't know, but I remember the word Nike. And Laura's like, that sounds like a great intention. I wish that for you, right? So I said, do you mind if the first day we get there, I do a couple 10-minute Zooms with current users? She's like, go for it. I'll be at the pool. I will see you at dinner, my friend.
Right.
So I talked to them and asked the questions like, what do you love about this? Had them. It was sort of interesting hearing their thoughts on what was broken, what was working. But I'm telling you, the third guy I spoke to, I was going into the wind up because I asked for 10 minutes, about 8 minutes in, I was like, Justin, really appreciate your time, man. Super generous of you. Thank you. We're going to wrap up. And he's like, Steven, you asked the wrong question.
Interesting.
Okay. What was the right question? He's like, you should have asked me why I pay you. Okay. I mean, it's 30 cents a day. Didn't think it was like the big thing. It's not like buying a Birkin bag or something, right?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so why do you pay me? He said, at 3:00, I can be playing with my kids. They're 2 and 4. Or at 6:00, I can be down on myself, be like, where the hell did the day go? He said, the difference is, I open your app in the morning. I pay you because my kids are not going to be 2 and 4 forever.
Mm.
And I was like, whoa, okay, I'm going to go now. Thank you for that. Have dinner with Laura. I was like, I spoke to this dude who is more articulate about what I'm doing than I am. Wow.
Pay him for a testimonial, record that thing and get that out there.
I still see him in our coffee shop, in our little thing. So we're brushing our teeth and Laura looks at me and she says, you asked the universe to kind of like bubble up something for you. I think the universe came and spoke to you through that guy because what he described, in yoga, we hear all these things about like Sukha and karma and dharma and prana. And she's like, that's literally Sukha. That is the feeling of happiness when you're self-fulfilled, when you're in your lane, doing the thing you're meant to do. You're good at it. It's easeful. She's like, there's your gift. From bed, I went on my phone, purchased the Sukha Company domain that night. That's how history. And that is thanks to a user who was like, let me tell you what you're doing, Mr. Puri, because you don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've definitely been in that situation where you look at the end of the day and you're like, man, I didn't get anything done, but I was super busy, right? And you probably were just sucked into your emails. You did low value tasks and you felt productive, but you're like, man, I didn't push any of those big hairy objects that are going to move my business forward, whether you're an employee or you're a founder, right? You've got your own
Justin,
business.
you nailed
it.
Nailed it. That is it. And by the way, let me pick up on that for a moment and hang a lantern on that, because anyone listening who is building a company or is advising one of their portfolio companies and trying to nurture them onto that great exit, right? What you just said, I want to make sure we really like hang a lantern on this, which is to do the things that move your life forward or the life of your team forward. That does not happen in half-hour bursts between Zoom meetings. That's when you staple your TPS reports and turn them in,
Right.
If you want to have a team that does that stuff where someone in the staff meeting goes, hey man, like I built this. And everyone's like, oh my God, we should do that. That's because you create a culture of focus time. You say, hey, you know what? These things happen because you have like 2-hour block and I trust you. You're not going windsurfing and you're not like, playing video games, but I'm not going to bug you. And maybe we should all have a deal not to bug each other. But in that block, that's when you do the thing where you go, I move the company forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about kind of owning your calendar, not letting your calendar own you, right? Especially if you're the idea person, right? So if your whole role is to create the vision for the company and move the company forward, you need to have time to let your brain do kind of what you did on vacation. Sometimes it is completely unplugging and just be like, you know what, I'm going to go for a walk without my phone, without a podcast, without anything. And I'm just going to go for a walk and let my brain do what I'm doing. I actually just started, I like to run every once in a while. And so I've just started over the last kind of 2 months, not taking my phone or my AirPods. So I just go for a run. I hated it at the beginning because all you hear is your feet and your breath and all that stuff. But then you just let your brain go for 2, 3, 4, 6 miles, whatever it is. And sometimes you think about the dumbest shit ever, but other times you come up with ideas, and then you get back to the house and you run into your office and you write some stuff down, or you, you know, grab your phone and record it. And is it all gold? No, but at least you're giving your time, yourself space to think.
There's neuroscience behind that.
I did not know that.
There is a great book called The Net and the Butterfly by Olivia Fox and Judah Pollock. And it talks about exactly what you said, which I first saw when I was like 20 years old. I was working in a trailer company making trailers for movies, right? Yeah. And we did a lot of the Warner Brothers and Buena Vista, which means basically Disney work. So you'd get in movies, and I ran the little office where we get the movie in it. I would assign it to a writer-producer to watch it and then write a trailer, which would send to the studio for notes, right?
Got it.
So I'm handing these out all day long. Run by 2 guys who've been doing this for like 20 years, really well respected in Hollywood. One of them comes to my office. Keep in mind, I'm 20 years old, right? He's like 45 or whatever. And he's like, hey, Stevie. He always calls me Stevie. He's like, hey, Stevie, do you know that guy Bart? And I was like, there's a runner in the vault named Bart. Nice guy. I was in the elevator with him once. Yeah. He's like, you ever give Bart a movie to write a trailer? I was like, the guy in the vault who drives tapes around Hollywood. I haven't, Jeff. Where are you going with this one, right? He's like, I have an instinct about him, Stevie. I was like, your name's on the door. You've been doing this, blah, blah. You want me to give him a movie? He's like, done, right? So I gave him like some Warner Brothers B title to have like a month deadline. If he didn't want to do it after a week, I give it to a pro who could knock it out like in 2 days, right?
Right.
Jeff comes to my office 2 days later. He's like, how did Bart do? And I'm like, Jeff, I gave him the movie 2 days ago. He's never written a trailer in his life. I pulled him out of his car driving tapes around, right? He goes, okay. What else did you give him? Jeff, I didn't give him anything else. He's never written something. He goes, Steve, let me give you a lesson. He's going to stare at the one thing you gave him with like little beads of sweat coming out of his temples, and he's going to write the most obvious version of that trailer, because the part of his mind that's going to do the, chocolate and peanut butter. Oh, what would they taste like together? That happens when he's focused on the other thing. It's always about the other thing creatively. I've seen that proven true throughout my film career, throughout my tech career. You can be a designer. You can be like a product, whatever. It's that thing you described, which is when your executive mode network is busy with this other thing, your default mode, which is that little child that's like, oh, I wonder what a cell phone tastes like. That's the one that comes up with the, wow, I never would have thought about that. That's great.
Yeah, it's almost like when you're like, hey, I forgot what I was going to say, and then 2 minutes later you're talking about something completely different, and then you remember. It's just like that. Your brain just needed to kind of like go off on a tangent and then come back.
That's exactly right. And there's a lot of science around that.
Yeah. As you think about kind of the next 12 months, right? So we're recording it in June 2025. If we jumped on a podcast a year from now, what would make that conversation super successful from a business standpoint? Or like, where are you trying
Justin,
to take
what a great question. Thank you.
you.
No one has asked me that on a podcast before or any speaking engagement before. In 12 months, I would be very proud if I said that in some communities, which might be engineering, or like big cohorts are engineering, design, and writing, right? Most of our members are in this, is if in those communities, we started to become like a household sort of name, like an Oura Ring or an Apple Watch, like became a thing of like, oh, my 10,000 steps. It became a thing of like, of course I work in here. Just like, I want to be done at 3 and do great work, not at 6 o'clock, be frustrated and like, I'll get up early tomorrow. That great lie. Right. I'll get up early tomorrow and finish what I didn't do today. Like, get rid of that. That would be amazing. Right now, our unit economics we're positive, so I don't need to raise, which is great. So I don't have to figure out the metrics to get an investor. Rather, it's about how do I make the product so beautiful that people just keep going like, oh man, you got to try this thing that I use.
Well, those are 2 very, very good goals. And I guess On the raise part, because it is a challenging market, and you've raised money before, probably different times when you were doing that. If people are listening and they're like, I need to raise money, and maybe their unit economics are good but not great, like what's some advice you would give people that, and maybe this is broader around raising money, starting a business? Everybody's got ideas, right? And some people are very risk forward, and they're going to like say, you know what, I'm going to go burn all the boats and all the bridges, and I'm going to go start this thing. Other people are very more risk averse, like myself. That's like, I need to have everything like structured and set up before I jump out and do my own thing. I guess a two-parter. Talk a little about the raising environment, and then also just like what advice would you give somebody that wants to jump out and start their own thing?
Okay, so I've noticed that in life, people always give advice that's usually the advice that they wish they'd gotten. It's very common, right? So I'm going to try not to just do that, even though that is my biggest influence, is my own experience, right?
Right.
Okay. So I would say this. My friends who are on the funding side right now, they're intimately aware of how hard an exit is right now. A IPO, something like, it is not the environment where it's just like, Chamath is SPACing stuff every 2 weeks and doing SP. It's just like, it's not that, right? So you have to demonstrate, and this is sometimes thinking without your founder's cap on, really putting the cap of like, if I were an investor in my company, what is the exit? How do I paint a picture of you're not going to be holding on to this thing in 10 years and like there are no distributions, your LPs, like what happened, right? So that'd be my biggest advice, because I think that is one of the things that is really hard. Whether you are raising and you're trying to find LPs and you're trying to convince them there will be distributions, there is an exit to this fund, or whether you are a founder and you're talking to potential investor and you're like, here's a picture, here's a comp of how I think I could take this thing public, or here are the examples of who should acquire this in 3 years, right? So that, I think, if you want to talk about the funding environment, that's my best advice. The other part of your question, though, I'll answer, which is definitely in the time I was in SF and LA, the excitement of I'm building something great diminished relative to how much I'd raised. It was almost the conversation of like, oh my God, I've raised, like 15 million on a 40, whatever. That was almost more than the user acquisition. It was like, that's so great. Oh my God, Andreessen's in your round, or, it's Excel, or, whomever, Jim Breyer came down here. Yeah. He's actually now in Austin, funny. That really takes your eye off the ball. It doesn't matter how much you raise. It matters if someone uses this and goes, oh my God, I should like tell people about this. Tell people my company, tell my friends about it, whatever it is. Like if you get obsessed with the raise, there better be someone else in your company, a co-founder who's obsessed with the product.
Yeah, because I talk to a lot of founders, especially early stage, where they feel like 90% of their job is raising capital. And it's like you raise one round and then you're right into the next one. And so I think that's an interesting comment about having a business focused co-founder, because if you're focused on the raise, nobody's focused on the build and the next product and the features and talking to customers and all of that. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And the raise, the thing is, it is true. Raising is a job and you're never done. If you're in that sort of rat race, you go from one round to the next, and it's just the way it is. But I think the point I want to make is that there was a sense of I'm raising so I can get this product built this way, that shifted in the Valley, at least, into I'm raising, and then when I'm out at dinner, everyone wants to know how much I raised, what the next round is going to be. And the product almost becomes secondary. It's like the substrate to get the raise, as opposed to the raise as a substrate to get the product.
Fascinating. Well, we could definitely dig into this or unpack this, because I could go back to your days in Hollywood and talk more about that.
But it was a fun episode, right?
but I won't gonna dig in too deep. I obviously respect your time and everything, but I do want to end it the way I end every episode, with a three-pack question. So first question here, what is an influential book or podcast that you might recommend? You've mentioned a few books throughout the episode, so I don't know if you want to use one of those or if you've got one kind of teed up for this one.
I'm going to give one that's a little further afield just to keep things interesting, because you could read Flow, you could read Deep Work. They're fantastic use of your time. They'll change how you think. They're all great. But I'm going to give you one that's really odd and most people have not read or heard of, which is Will and Ariel Durant, who wrote The History of Civilization, right? Spent most of their lives writing that. At the end of writing that 4,000 page, 18 volume work, 13 or whatever it is, they wrote this tiny book. It was like, what did we learn? And it's called The Lessons of History. And it is, hey man, we studied all of history, all of human history.
Yeah.
Here are the patterns of humans. It is a fascinating book. I reread that every now and then just for pleasure.
Got it. I have not been recommended that one yet, so I will.
Nope.
I'll have to add
Most people don't know about it.
No, thank you for that. All right, second question here. What is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
Yoga. It's how I met Laura. I have a daily yoga practice. I'll be at yoga tonight.
Love it. Very cool. And then you maybe already mentioned this one as well, but favorite vacation spot? Is it Bali or someplace else?
You think it's going to be Bali. I don't know that it's Bali. I'll tell you this. Bali was great for, 10, 12 days, whatever it was. Definitely hit the point of like, I'm bored out of my mind. It's beautiful. I've eaten all of the foods and I've done all the yoga, right?
Yeah.
I would say probably some of my fondest memories are Japan with Laura. We've been there 3 or 4 times together. I think the culture is super interesting. The food is amazing. There's a sense of respect between people that I dig. It's not a culture that's welcoming of foreigners. Like I've never had a friend in Japan where I felt like I was part of their family or part of their culture. It's definitely like we're here and you are there. Truly amazing. I love that. And I lived for a while in South America and I really love Rio. Yeah, I feel strangely more at home with the rhythm of life there than I do in this country. And I have zero Latin blood in me.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, I think, just some of you traveled to Europe a little bit. Some of we went to Italy, and it's just the pace of life here is very now, what's going on. And, sometimes it is nice to just go with the flow and have a day where you wake up when you wake up, you sip some wine, you eat some pasta. Like that's not a bad thing every once in a while.
Totally.
Awesome. Well, Steven, man, it's been really awesome to connect and learn about your story. Obviously, we could have another podcast talking about some of the other things that we didn't dig into. But if people want to learn more about you, if they want to connect with you and check out your company, or maybe pick your brain about having a chat with Hugh Jackman, what's the best way to connect with you?
I will offer this very sincerely. Anyone who has a question about something I brought up, like, "Whoa, what was that book or what was that blog or something?" I return all my emails in 24 hours if I am not sick or traveling. My email address is very public. It is Steven with a V at thesukha.co, like the Sukha Company, THESUKHA.co. I will not have time to write you back 19 paragraphs about what I think about your company or something. But if you ask a question I can help, I will absolutely send you a link like, hey, read this. This might be really helpful. Awesome. So that's how to reach me. It doesn't have to be about what I do, including recommending competitive apps. If there's something that's better for you than what we do, I will happily do that. There are some really smart founders out there making beautiful things to help. So there's that. And then if someone wants to try the thing that we are building, it changes every couple of days. We're still building it. That is, of course, at thesukha, THESUKHA.co. 7-day free trial. No credit card needed. You can sign up in 10 seconds or less. It's like first name, last name, email, and you can use it.
Awesome. We'll add all that stuff into the show notes. Steven, man, it's been awesome to connect and share your story. And I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Good night, everybody.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.